Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast, or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by the free stuff page on my website, classtechtips.com. This is where you'll find free weekly planner pages, graphic organizers, ebooks, and more. Just head to classtechtips.com and press the free stuff button at the top of the page to find lots of free downloads for you and your colleagues. That's classtechtips.com and press the free stuff button at the top of the page. This week's episode is titled Fun Ways to Help Kids Set Goals. And engaging students in goal-setting activities can take place really any time of year. We sometimes think of setting goals as a January 1st activity or a first day of school activity, but if you're kicking off a new unit of study or you're several weeks into the school year, this can be a great time to pause and give kids opportunities to set some short-term and long-term goals. And whether you introduce a portfolio or ask kids to share video updates or maybe create interactive journals together, the possibilities for goal settings are endless. And there's plenty of fun ways to go about it. And that's what we're going to talk about together in today's episode. Now, there's lots of reasons why you might introduce goal-setting activities to kids in the first place, rather than just focus on performance or the end piece that a student creates. Goals can focus on the learning and how they improve over all sorts of tasks. You can really take today's episode in many different directions. Maybe you're helping kids build their time management and organizational skills. Well, that's another great reason to introduce goal setting into the conversation. So we're going to look today at 10 goal setting activities for kids that you can customize for your group. And for each one, I'll mention different, a digital tool. So you'll have, almost a dozen digital tools to try out. But if you have a favorite tool with similar features, go for that one. These are not tool-dependent ideas by any means. These are just some big ideas that you can use. And I want to make sure that you've got a couple examples of tools to put this into action, but use what's in your tool belt is what I'm getting at here. First up on the list is digital vision boards. Students could use a graphic design tool, maybe Adobe Express, to create a digital vision board and to represent their goals. Now, an activity like this can encourage creativity and help kids visualize their aspirations. It might combine photos they've snapped themselves or images they've searched for inside of a platform. I use Adobe Express as an example. I've done some work with their team and just love this as a creative tool, but there are lots of different graphic design tools you can use, and you'll probably want to check out an earlier episode of the podcast where I talk about kids as graphic designers with Tony Vincent. So make sure to check that one out. I'll put a link to it in the show notes also. Next up is goal setting videos. Students can create short videos explaining their goals and how they plan to achieve them. If your students don't want to jump on video themselves, maybe they use an animated video creator or they cover their face with an emoji. There's lots of ways for them to be off camera while still creating a video. And this is a great way to get them talking, right, about what it is they want to accomplish, whether they are visible on screen or not. So next up is to illustrate your goals. And there are a few great tools that make it easy for kids to illustrate or draw. Kids can draw a picture of their goal using a tool like Seesaw, which would then let them record their voice to explain their picture. So another way to kind of keep them off video, but combining that illustration with the video. You might even have kids who are using that tool, using Seesaw, export it as a QR code. You can share Seesaw creations as a QR code and then add their goals to an interactive bulletin board. So that's an option there too. Next up is digital reflection with forms. Now, I love Google Forms. You might use Microsoft Forms or JotForm, both great options too. And I shared a post on the blog. I want to say it was last year, or no, the very beginning of 2024. It feels like a little bit ago, but the very beginning of the year. And I shared a post that talked about creative ways to use Google Forms. And this is also a valuable resource for helping kids set and track goals, especially where you want them to give input and feedback. So students can set up one form and complete it every time they have something to chronicle. Then all their responses with the updates on their goals will end up in a Google Sheet. The forms connect to Sheets. And so it could be just for them to have that sheet with all their updates, kind of like automatic journal entries that they're populating, or they might share that sheet with you or an accountability partner. So a great way to stay organized and combine that with the goal setting piece as well. Next up is tackling a goal with chatbots. And I've shared lots of ways to use chatbots on the blog and on the podcast this past year. If you go to classtechtips.com/AI, you'll see oodles of resources there. But if you're helping kids tackle a new goal and you're not really sure where to start, like maybe it's something that they're working on that is adjacent to the content area, or maybe it's more of an organizational piece that they want to work on. Maybe they just have something that you need a little help on how to support them. Well, you might go to a chatbot and you might say, give me 10 tips to share with a student who has the goal of, and you can find some ideas to share with them or for you, right, to help you best support them. So tackling a goal with the chatbot might be more of a behind the scenes way of supporting students, or if they have access to a chatbot, you might introduce this strategy for them to kind of have a collaborator or thought partner, if you will. Next up is to share on your door. And maybe this connects back to the QR code piece I mentioned before, right? But if your kids have made a video, website, or digital product, digital artifact of learning that captures their goal, they can share it with a link that connects to a QR code. And even though some tools have this like automatically built in, like Seesaw I mentioned before, there doesn't have to be a tool like that. As long as you're saving a project to a link, your kids can create a QR code that then is put up on a physical display, like a classroom door. I did a post earlier this year, or this school year, about classroom door decorations with QR codes. I use QR codes as a classroom teacher over a decade ago. They're a favorite, and you can use a free QR code generator to take the link to student work, turn it into a QR code, and then share it on a space like a classroom door to really help kids let other people know about their goals, what they're working on, or what they've accomplished so far this school year. Now, another option for sharing is to share progress or goal updates. I love the tool Padlet. If you've attended a workshop or webinar with me this year, you've probably seen it in action. It's one of my favorite tools for collaboration, whether we're doing something virtually or in person. And teachers can create a Padlet page and share the link with students. Then kids can add a picture, write a response, record their voice, or choose another way to give an update on a goal that they have. I love that Padlet gives oodles of options, so it's great if you're working in an environment where you want to give kids plenty of choice on how they might share their goals. Next up is a blog post reflection. And this is something that you can do with students who maybe you also want them to write a bit, or you're making an ELA connection. And this can take many forms. You might even do a micro blogging spin that combines a picture with short text. I'll link out in the show notes to a template I've made for this that might be useful. So a blog post reflection could be text-based, like kids are writing 2 or 3 paragraphs, giving an update on their goal once a week, or it may be more of a micro blogging activity that looks like an Instagram post or series of Instagram posts where once a week they have an image and then they have a caption or short update, that microblog that goes along with it. I've got 2 more for you on our list of fun ways to help students set goals. Anytime I share a listicle, I always like to remind listeners, whether it's someone who I'm in a workshop with face-to-face or on the podcast, right, that this is not about doing all the things on the list, but gathering some ideas where maybe 1 or 2 is for you or 1 or 2 is for someone else. So you might be maxed out with ideas already from the first 8 on this list, but I've got 2 more to share with you. The next one is goal journals. If you want to introduce a journaling practice to your students, you might want to connect it to a goal-setting activity. For example, you can introduce a tool like Book Creator, which lets students create customizable interactive ebooks. They can set up their journal and add an update on the progress each week or every day. I've got lots of Book Creator resources on my site. I'll link out to some in the show notes too, but what I like about using them as a journaling tool is kind of like Padlet. It gives student users lots of ways to decide on the best way to share for them. So like, are they going to choose audio? Are they going to choose video? Are they going to use voice to text? It's one of the reasons I love it as a space for kids to share. And in this activity, it's goal journals. Finally on our list is student portfolios. Portfolios are a great way to have kids keep track of their progress towards a goal, and it might feel a little more formal than a journal, particularly if kids know that their portfolio is going to be viewed by a program they're applying for, by their school community, by their teacher in the next year, if they're applying for a school, right? So portfolios tend to have more of a formal feel to them. So this might be appropriate for your group, or you might want something that feels a little less formal. So when kids are creating a portfolio, right, they might use a template so that they give their update on their progress, or they might decide that they're going to have a clear goal, show some progress, and then have the final result go along with it. So you might set this up in a particular way, but student portfolios can be a fun way to help kids set and share their goals alongside the celebration of that final artifact. So there you have it, almost a dozen fun ways to help kids set goals. And whether you're listening to this episode in the first half of the school year or the second half of the school year or closer to January 1st, whenever you've happened to found this one, setting goals can really happen any time of year. It's never too late, right, to set a goal. We don't have to wait just for a milestone to do it. We can always pause and say, right now, is a great time for us to set some short or long-term goals. So let's make this EdTech easy with a few key points from today's episode. Goal setting promotes growth mindset and planning skills. Start with one activity tailored to your students. Use digital tools to share goals and track progress. Students can create videos, journals, blogs, and more. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from this episode by heading to classtechtips.com/podcast. This episode is sponsored by the free stuff page on my website, classtechtips.com. This is where you'll find free weekly planner pages, graphic organizers, ebooks, and more. Just head to classtechtips.com and press the free stuff button at the top of the page to find lots of free downloads for you and your colleagues. That's classtechtips.com and press the free stuff button at the top of the page. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.